pissed off moment, I called the head of forestry. And I used a few swears that I won't say here. And I was like, am I the only one that doesn't see any bombers? And he's like, man, do you know how windy it is? If I send bombers up, they're gonna crash, and now you're gonna have to deal with that too. And I was like, okay. And this is a guy, like, we're 25 years friends. Guy's a mentor to me. He showed me tons of stuff. And the last thing he said to me was, good luck. And I can remember hanging up from that and being like, good luck? Like, where's he going? How come I need luck? Doesn't he need luck too? And so, yeah, it was crazy, right? It was like hand-to-hand combat. There were guys just with shovels slinging dirt. There was chainsaws. Because we're out of water, there's just wherever you could get water, wherever you could find water. Our hydrant system was completely down. And we're a community not unlike this one, right? We have a creek runs right through the middle. We have a big lake on one side. We have a river that runs on the other side out of that lake. So there's water everywhere you look, but you can't get a drop of it, right? It's a sandy beach. Like, it's only up to your knees 100 feet out into the water. So you can't draft from it. You can't get it. It was just this impossible task to get water for us. So we're not getting any support from our emergency operations center. We're not getting any support from outside agencies yet. Our water's down, our power's down, our comms are down, and we're just gunslinging. We're just out there doing our thing, right? There's an evacuation, and this looks calm and nice, right? So you have to remember, so we evacuated about 2,000 people from the rural area into town. And then we took the 7,000 we have in town and the 2,000 we evacuated from out of town, so 9,000 people, and sent them out of town. And so for us, we were pretty lucky, we thought. There's a highway that runs both ways, east and west, and a highway that runs north. But there's a fire cut the highway off north and burnt that community out. And then the fire west of town had burnt down into the community. And the fire east of town luckily stayed on the north side of the highway and burnt in, so we had one direction. So 9,000 people got on that highway, and for the next 5.5 hours, drove an hour and 15 minutes to the next town to try and get out of, right? So the lineup was as slow as 10 kilometers an hour at one point. Everyone just like a train trying to get going, right? And so...
how fast was the fire moving at that point?
It was already, luckily, like, once they got past the stuff to the east, they're gone, right? The fire blew into town. I never measured, I never talked to anyone, but it happened so fast you couldn't even think about it. I would say we went from across the highway to into town, burning down dozens of homes in less than 30 minutes. So it's, it's wind driven, it's dry, it's hot. You always think you have lots of time, right? But it's, and you have to remember that these fires, all the fires that I started with, 2011, 2016, 2019, 2023, are all hot, dry, wind-driven fires, right? And so it's a thing that doesn't happen all the time, and so it kind of lulls us to sleep, right? We don't get those conditions very many days a year, but when we get those conditions, those are the days that these things always happen. If you go back and look through history, this is the days that those things always happen. And so when it barely ever happens, but it's the most severe thing that can happen, that's where we get all the trouble, right? We're not ready for that. The folks that have the jobs of fighting fires, whether it's wildfire or the firefighters in the back or structure protection people, they get most of them. They get 99.9% of the fires. So the problem isn't the 99.9%. The problem is that 0.01%, right? And when those conditions come together and how things change and all of those things happen. So it's tricky, right? There's no perfect formula. No one can tell you. I mean, the weather, my 5-year-old grandson could be a weatherman, right? I think it's gonna rain today. Oh, it didn't rain, too bad, right? I think it's gonna be sunny today. Hey, it's sunny, way to go, buddy, you're a weatherman. So, it's tricky. I think they could judge the weather pretty good for the next couple hours, all right? After that, it is what it is. Here, you have lake effect, you have the mountains, you have a lot of things, the ocean, what's happening over there, and a lot of things impacting the weather. So for us, same sort of thing, right? On this corner, this is 12th Street Southeast and 10th Avenue. And so I sat on this corner, and I don't know why, but I counted all the houses that were on fire. And, you know, there's 35 houses on fire when I look around. And so you count them, but why? Like, why would you count them? It doesn't make any sense, right? But I did it. Every single house you see in this picture I've been in before. A couple of these houses are houses my friends own or their families own. And I called in a strike here because just down the road on the other side of this picture, there was a fire started. And so Engine 8, can you come in and help a new start on 10th Avenue? Yeah, you bet, we're on the way. And my buddy Ronnie, who was working with me, walked up and he looks down and he bends down and he's looking. And he says, "Don't worry about that house, chief." And he walks away. And I was like, well, that's not nice. Like, why would you, right? And so I walk over, I say, "Hey, Ronnie, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, that's my rental house. Those guys moved out on Saturday. It's all good." And he just went back to work, grabbed the hose, and I was like, you know, your $350,000 house is burning down, but he didn't care. He just went back to work, right? And so I did what anyone would do. "Hey, Engine 8, stand down. It's all good. Do your thing. We guess we don't need you over here on 10th Avenue." And just a bunch more houses start to burn down, right?
Maybe when I see these many houses on fire, is this all a result of Ember?
Yeah, so the Ember was, at this time, so 2011, the Ember transfer was 125,000 embers per acre, right? So it's hard to fathom, 125,000 hot spots per acre.
In what time frame?
Like continuously pouring down at that, yeah. And they figure that out using tarps, boat tarps, the green on the grass, right? The different things. And so at that time, in Canada, that was the biggest recorded ember transfer in history. Since then, just so you know, they broke that record in Australia, 500,000 embers per acre, when that last big firestorm happened. And then this year, they broke that record again, 525,000 embers per acre. And so, you know, to me, it's kind of like the 100-year flood. If it happens every year, is it a 100-year flood anymore? If we break a record every couple of years, is it really a record anymore? Now it's just data, right? And so, yeah, it rained down on us, I'm telling you. It was a kilometer past us before we knew the first house was on fire. And we fought back for days trying to catch up to that. The ember transfer that comes with the dry, hot weather, and these types of trees that you see around here, those hot needles get flying. It is what it is, right? That's the ember transfer. The smoke's carrying that stuff, and it's carrying it, you know, my whole life. I grew up having what was typically cold needles blow into town and drop. This was all hot needles. Right? That's my chem teacher's house. Not too sad about that. I'm just kidding. But yeah, you know every person at every house, what's going on and what's happening. This is that group that I talked about, 9 firefighters, 2 contractors. The contractor's name, Bush Baby, beauty company name. And yeah, they sucked water out of the creek with his tank truck and those trucks and fought fire and saved the rest of that neighborhood. Would have been probably another 300-400 houses if they wouldn't have stopped this fire, right? And so to me, that's always like the heart of the paid on-call firefighter, the volunteer firefighter beats in me just like it does in most firefighters. It's where we start. Some finish there, some start there, but it's definitely the heart that beats in me. And so, you know, to know that they just stayed there and fought that fire and didn't complain to anyone and didn't say anything and just knew that the work that they were doing would save everybody else's house. And, you know, sadly, there was one whole truck of them. There was 3 fires by their community that was causing trouble, but they didn't leave. They didn't abandon their post. They just did their thing. So you can kind of see how it comes in like an arrow. That's the EOC on the far left. That's the EOC burning down. Right? So it pierced straight into the middle of our town. And really the only thing that stopped it from coming out the other side was wind. The wind died down a bit and we were able to get over there and work on right? When I sat down today, someone was talking about cedar hedges, like that's in the front here. So if you look at the front of the church on the left-hand side, there's a brown roof and kind of a cream-colored wall, and there's a hedge wall in the front of it. So that church burnt to the ground. Those hedges are actually on fire in this picture. Right behind it, oh, I wish this worked so bad, but so right behind it, so right here, there's 2 3-story apartment buildings. Right here, there's 2 3-story apartment buildings. Right here, there's a 3-story condo building. So in total, 6 3-story apartment buildings burned to the ground. Right through the smoke right there is my sister-in-law's house. That's a counselor, and that's the town's 2 doctors. Just to get a snapshot of what gets lost on a single day. You know, it's 35% of a town, but for me, the impact of that is a lot larger. This is our EOC. So you saw earlier we used heavy equipment there. So this was the first fire that we can find where we actually rolled heavy equipment in. We used excavators and a cat. This one, we tried to separate the library from the main office down the first hallway. It didn't work, so you could see where we drove the cat down the second hallway. That didn't work, so then we went into the third hallway. That didn't work. And then there's a glass atrium just out of the picture. We drove it through there and then held it at the firewall, which looked a little wonky when we were all done because the 4th phase of the building was kind of still there, but that's kind of where it got stopped. This operation was actually run by, at the time, he was a counselor. He just quit being a firefighter to be a counselor. And I said, who wants to go to the mall and bash some stuff down with a cat? And he said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so he ran that operation. He never did anything like that in his life. The cat group that was actually at the fire hall, I said, I'm gonna send you down to the mall. So this part's a mall, the rest is the government center. And I said, you gotta knock down a bunch of buildings for us. And the guy's like, yeah, we can't do that. And I'm like, it's all cool, right? It's a state of local emergency, so you can do it or we can do it. There's some guys here who'd be happy to do it. So he goes out to his truck, and I don't know who he called or how he called or whatever. And he said, my boss at forestry said, if you send us an email, we can do it. And so remember when I talked about not being that patient of a guy? That flared a bit right there. So he went back out. He must have been talking on radio. He went back out and he said, well, the guy said, well, if you just call him, we can do it. I was like, okay, I'm done with you, buddy. Get out of the way, right? You, and you're running cats and hose. I'm from an industrial construction town, lots of forestry. Everybody can do everything. So the guys finally were like, okay, we'll do it, right? It's our equipment. We know what we're doing. We'll do it. So they went over there. And so what I can tell you is one of the hardest things I've ever done is to get some heavy equipment operators to start knocking things down. Do you want to guess what the second hardest thing is? Yeah, I had to get them to stop. There's a forestry guy right there, he knows. And so, definitely it was a trick, right? We used them in the neighborhoods. We would knock a house down, and then that would keep the fire in the basement so that we wouldn't get 2 or 3 stories of fire. And then we kind of eventually got enough knocked down that we got ahead of the fire. So we used that same technique in Fort McMurray to save about 1,200 houses up on one of the ridges. So it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough call to make, but that's kind of what they send us to do now. So it's kind of what we do.
In the Fort Mac story, I really like where you talk about sending the heavy equipment guys to knock trucks, the F-150 and 250s into the basements.
Yeah, so Fort McMurray is a different beast because the equipment's bigger. So Fort McMurray is kind of like Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. Well, it's even bigger in Fort McMurray. And so they use great big cats for the construction and forestry folks in here. We were using a bunch of D11Ns, big high track, massive cats. And we couldn't get over the 4-foot basements. And so what we found worked best is if you kind of put a small car and then like a 3/4 ton or 1 ton pickup, then you could just drive right up over top of the concrete and get to the wood part and push it off It didn't work out that great for one cat, only one cat. Nobody got hurt, but it's like in the making of this movie, no one was injured, but one cat died. D11N. But yeah, so that's tricky for sure. You can see in these areas though, so this is 12th Street, right? This is 10th Avenue and 12th Street. This was a condo, so those condos with no firefighting applied to them because we didn't have any firefighting capability. There was 12 in a row and one burnt down every half hour. It would get to the firewall, it would stop for a little while, then it would light the next one on fire. And we couldn't do anything but sit there and watch it. You can see the total destruction of some of these areas. So at this time, there still was only 8 fire trucks, 50 firefighters spread amongst the whole town.
And no water.
No, whatever we could beg, borrow, or steal from the creek.
Wow.
This is our fire hall. So out, I talked about Fire 56. So this is the fire hall, Fire 56. They went out there because the alarm for the water plant way out in Widewater is about 20 kilometers out. Started going off. So they went out, put out the roof of the water plant. Thought we might need that. And on the way back, they decided to stop at the fire hall and get some more hose. They pulled up to this. This is 110% my fault. I know exactly what happened here because I'm the one that stacked up the 10 pallets on the back corner of that for practice on Tuesday. I decided that I didn't want to walk out to the middle of the field and put the pallets there, so I put them all by the building so the kids wouldn't light them on fire. Pretty genius, eh? So sadly we lost that whole one. They replaced this with the biggest Taj Mahal fire hall. 3 double drive-through bays, big hose tower, just this monstrosity of a thing. Don't know why they did that, but they did. So firefighters were able to get all their cars out of there, and we were able to get most of their personal effects, but the fire hall burnt down. So the night, so Saturday going into Sunday, no, it'd be Sunday going into Monday now. We started to get other people from other towns, right? I had a talk with the fire commissioner of the province, and he had said to me at about 10:30 at night, he's like, "Don't worry, Jamie, we're sending everybody." And I had said to him, "I don't know if everybody's enough, so maybe find some more." And we ended up getting about 1,000 firefighters from 38 different fire departments, from as far north as you can think to as far south, far east, far west. And you have to remember that this firestorm was happening all over the north. It wasn't just Slave Lake, right? So our closest neighbors weren't even able to come because they were fighting fires in their towns, right? So yeah, they just kept fighting, kept going. There's the map. So this is Slave Lake. Firefighters from High Level, Lethbridge, Lloydminster, and Jasper. So the whole province got in on this. It was insane. I can't even tell you what it was like. Firefighters just kept pouring in all night, and as they would get there, we would assign them to different sections, right? Little ego piece, right? So I always tell people, if you're trying to solve a problem, ego, turf, time, and money, sort out which of those 4 things is the problem, and then start working on the problem. So there was quite a bit of ego. You can imagine 1,000 firefighters. You might not be able to. The guys in the back can imagine with me 1,000 firefighters showing up, and 150 of them thought they were in charge. So, I can remember a guy getting there from Strathcona County, and he walked into my office in the fire hall while our town's on fire, and he said, "The province sent me here to take over." And I was like, I got to make a decision here, right? I could take one step forward and shake his hand and we'll sort this out, or I could toss this guy out on his ear and see what happens. I'm happy to say I took a step forward and shook his hand, but if I learned anything that day, it was about the whole ego, turf, time, and money piece. That's a real thing. If you apply those 4 words to any problem you're having in your life, from your marriage to trouble with your kids to, right? It's all about ego, turf, time, and money. And if you sort out which problem it is, you can focus on getting that problem resolved. And I can tell you 1,000 firefighters worth of ego would barely fit in this building. I will also add, that's how you want your firefighters. So it's not a negative thing, right? I think we want our firefighters to have a little bit of ego and a little bit of go get them. But you put 1,000 of us in a room and it's a lot. You could taste it. This is kind of what it looked like the days that went by. So you can see on the left, that's all the Calgary fire engines. So this is how desperate we were. 8 Calgary fire engines, never been driven, parked in their yard, getting ready to be deployed into their system. They loaded them on trucks, they loaded them up with the warehouse stuff, and then they loaded firefighters onto buses and drove them from Calgary all the way to Slave Lake and unloaded them, right? These guys were genius. They sent their own mechanics, they sent a tire truck. We all used them, we all did crazy stuff. So it was, our trucks are these crappy ones on the right here. The yellow one, which we pumped till it died, and then the white one, which didn't fare much better. That purple pickup truck just to the top right, that's one the Dodge dealer lent me, because I had a brand new Ford. So on the Friday, I gotta show you this picture. On the Friday, this is the Ford dealership in town, and he had phoned me and he was like, "Hey Jamie, your new truck's here, do you wanna pick it up?" And I'm like, "Oh, I gotta get you a check and do all the insurance. Wow, you know, I don't wanna do that, so could I just pick it up Monday?" So I figured all that time, I figured my truck's in this whole lineup, right? And so finally, like on the Wednesday, he calls me up and he's like, "Hey, you want your truck?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're so funny, Doug. I'm such in the mood for a great joke." And he's like, "No, your truck was in the wash bay. I told the boys to wash it up because you're picking it up on Monday." So I was actually able to get my new work truck and go to work. So if you love Fords, I'm sorry, this is a super sad picture for you. But this is how crazy the wind was. So 40 pickups in a row burnt down. That red pickup had $8,000 damage. That white pickup had $1,000 damage, just a new mirror. And that brown pickup they sold as brand new. So that's how fast the wind pushed and how wind driven the fire was. For me, this is my neighborhood, right? I grew up, I played in this neighborhood. I can remember the evacuation out of this neighborhood. I can remember, thinking, how could this happen to us? Because I'm gonna tell you, our plan was simple, and we had the same plan for 50 years of being a fire department. When the fire comes, we'll park the trucks on the edge of town, we'll hook up to the fire hydrants, and we'll just pour water into the forest, and that will stop the forest fire. Sounded like a decent plan for 50 years straight. On the 51st year, dumbest plan on the planet, didn't work for a second, right? But it just shows you how it works, right? So we had a plan, we practiced it, we talked about it, we had some close calls where we thought we crushed it, and so they just became embedded that was our plan. So when the day came, of course, we went to the plan. We put trucks all along 12th Street, we hooked up to the hydrants, we started blowing water, and the fire blew a kilometer past us in an ember shower before we even knew what was going on. Burnt down all the electrical infrastructure, right? Our town is a 3 feet electrical. Power comes from east, west, and north. And on that day, every single one of those feeds got burnt down, right? And so, you end up with this.
So if we were to talk about lessons learned, and you think about your Slave Lake experience, and now you've spent a couple days in the village, what do you think the lessons are we can take away from?
I think the lessons that everyone lives in the forest can take away is be prepared, right? Just know that on those crazy days, if something happens, right, and you're gonna know them. It's gonna be hot, it's gonna be dry, it's gonna be a little windy. You'll wake up and go outside and go, this is a day that I don't love, right? And it's because there's been so many forest fires. If I went back 10, 12 years ago, you'd wake up, go outside and go, oh, beauty day, I'm going to the lake, right? I think all that's happened over the last 10 or 12 years has kind of taught us to pay attention to the weather and where's the fires. It wasn't very many weeks ago that you guys were, watching some fires very cautiously, thinking about what could happen and where it could go, right? And so for me, it's always be prepared. You are responsible for yourself. You're responsible for the people in your house. Try to help out your neighbors if you can. Try to, have a plan, know what you're doing. This, for us, spawned so much. I mean, the province gave us $290 million, which is great. Now you can make 1 million plans, right? And so I was telling Ross today, I had more consultants come through and more plans done and more microscopes up my nether regions than you could ever imagine. I don't think anyone on the planet hates consultants as much as me. Funny, because I am one now, but at the time, I don't think, they were telling us do this, do that. And you can imagine we got international attention. And everyone started telling us what to do. Everyone started to tell us what fire smart meant. Everyone started to tell us what veg management meant. Everyone started to tell us what evacuation plan was. Everyone started to tell us how our firefighting equipment was inadequate. Everyone started to tell us get better training, right? And so, everyone's telling you these things. It's hard to take, right? I will tell you that I've never, as a fire chief, I think in the town that I was from, I walked with my head held high. I was proud to have that job. I was proud of that legacy piece. I was proud to, protect the people. I've never really been that level of proud again. It knocks you down a lot when these things happen. But we had to learn how to figure these things out, right? So we spent $6.5 million cutting down trees, mulching, thinning, pruning, was all that money well spent? No. We had to learn a lot of things. We had to see what worked and what didn't. We had to build an evacuation plan, right? So that's simple. You just tell everyone, get on the highway and drive out. But what if you can't use that highway? Well, then you just go on this other road and drive. What if you can't use that road? Oh, well, then, we'll all go stand at the beach. Sure. Yeah, okay. You bet. All 9,000 of us will hang out at the beach. That'll be cool. 2 porta potties. One guy with a food truck going, wait your turn. It's, and so I think a big learning for us was you got to have a real plan that makes sense, that's adaptable, that you can change. And then you got to be able to get that plan to the masses, right? So, for us, how do you tell 9,000 people what to do at once? And we went through everything. After we spent $135,000 on a siren, right? It was this omnidirectional siren. It was so weird, right? It tested every Thursday, and it would be like, the town is, no one knows. So this will, no one knows, right? And it was like, this thing is useless. And I would always say at the meetings is like, I know, like, big fire comes again, step 1, send someone to the siren, chop it down with a chainsaw. Because I'm not gonna listen to that while I'm trying to sort out everything else, right? So, we went to the social media things, right? The app, which was great. Our radio station thing obviously didn't work out, so we didn't go back to that. But at the end of the day, it's having a plan. So now the town is divided into zones. We could tell certain zones to go to different directions. We could tell some zones to hold while we send out others, right? You can't send everyone out at once. People just, every movie you ever saw where they try to evacuate everything at once never works out, right? And so you have to have a plan. You have to know what the plan's gonna be. You have to know how you're gonna communicate. And I'll just be blunt with you because I got nothing to lose. You're in a tough spot here because you have a whole bunch of strangers here every single day in the summertime that don't listen to your radio station and don't have your app and don't know how to get information from any of you and don't really care to. They're just here having a good blast, right? They're swimming and boating and hanging out, and some of them speak the same language as you and some don't, and so you have all kinds of comms problems. So, lessons learned would be have an evacuation plan, know how to affect it and get it out. Other things we learned, things you can imagine, right? 35% of your town burns down, and how do you figure it out? We obviously hired some people, some temporary, some permanent. We started thinking about, how will we manage emergency management, fire smart, fire, our mutual aid agreements, our agreements with the police, ambulance, as we rebuild our town, as we figure it out, how will we manage all these things? And so, you can't just run around hiring full-time people to do everything. So we had to think of all the jobs and then think about who we're gonna hire and how we're gonna hire them. The only real great thing the government did, hate to bash them, no, I don't, I love it, but they said we're gonna have every school-age kid in a temporary house before school opens. And so this happened in May, and on September 6th when school opened, every single solitary family that had school-age kids that needed a temporary house were living in a temporary house, and every single one of those kids attended school on September 6th that year. So, I don't hate everything about the government, But, you know, I've certainly been let down by them, but in this particular case, I do tell that story because they were awesome and they did help us out.
Jimmy, you were talking about evacuation routes here. We spent part of the day looking at the start of the Ruby Creek, I always want to say Ruby Ridge, Ruby Creek evacuation route, and kind of what are your thoughts and what lessons did you learn from Stave that we might apply?
Yeah, I spent the last 12 years fighting to have 2 ways out everywhere I go. So I guess my answer would be have 2 ways out, figure it out. You know, whatever it takes, ego, turf, time, money, politics, whatever, figure it out. And that's easy to say and harder to do. But I gotta tell you, and I'll just, again, I don't know you, but I'll just tell you how I feel. I don't love being here. I know a lot, I've been through a lot of crazy things. I don't love being here. And I'm gonna tell you why. Give me a chance, right? I don't love being in town right now because I feel like it's hot. I feel like you've been through some dry events. I was happy when it rained the other day, which probably pissed you off, but I was happy. You live in a box canyon with trees on both sides and one way out. And like, I don't go to Banff, which is an hour and a half from my house in the summertime, because I'm terrified of being there in the summertime. I don't go to Canmore in the summertime because I'm terrified of what could happen when I go to Canmore. And so I'm not terrified of being in your town. It's a little moister here, you have a little bit of different weather, you have a different kind of forest, but I don't love it, right? When I drive around, it makes me nervous. And so I'm not saying that so that you have to be nervous and you have to live your life like me, but you have to understand that I've been through some stuff. And so when I drive into places, you know, I look around and I live in the worst case scenario, right? You know, every minute of every day of my life is what's the worst thing that could happen today, right? Once I get that sorted out in my head and what I would do about that, I can go on with the rest of my day and the rest of my life. And so, you know, when I drive into your town, I do the same thing. Where would I go? What would I do? How would I notice? How could I get that information? It rained, so I slept like a baby that night because I was happy that it rained. But today, again, I see the signs around town that said, you know, don't smoke here and don't do this and don't burn anything. And I think that in the very recent past, you've had some pretty dry, scary days. And so when I see those signs and I see that stuff, for me, it's about, you know, just have a plan, get ready. And so, you know, I don't do these talks to try to scare you. I do these talks to share with you what happened. I do these talks to spur discussion. I do these talks to help people think about, you know, what you're gonna do in your town. And it's your story, right? You have people in the back that are involved in that. You have politicians in here probably that are involved in that. You have residents that obviously care and are involved in that. And so to me, you know, the biggest lesson I could tell you is figure it out. Don't talk about it, don't argue about it, right? Just work together, find a way, figure it out. You know, if your way doesn't win, maybe another way works, right? But at the end of the day, if we could find a way to get multiple ways out of here, good. If we could find a way to support the fire department so they can do their work, good. If we could find a way to work with the government so they could help sort out some of the fire smart pieces and the vegetation management pieces, good. You know, all of these things are good, and you don't have to wait till something bad happens for all of these things to start to happen. I think you just have to find the trigger points and start to go, right? Simple things, right? A big thing that I just had to learn the hard way, you know, at 30-something years old, being the chief of a town that 35% of it burned down, was like, how are we gonna do all this? All right, and so always that saying, right? How do you walk 1,000 miles? Just take a step, take another one, take a few more. Pretty soon you got a mile behind you, so you only got 999 more to go. And you just figure it out day after day, right? And so you know, those are all lessons that you learn when you go through these things, right? We were lucky, no one was killed in the evacuation, but it's not because the fire didn't try, right? One of my worst stories was a mom, her kids kept opening the curtains, and they would, you know, Mom, the fire's coming, the fire's coming. She's like, no, it's good, they're gonna get it, and she would shut the curtains. And they didn't leave until their neighbor finally come over and said, you can stay if you want, but these kids are coming with me. They're not gonna burn to death because you're scared to move, right? And so, you know, he got her out and got the kids out. You know, people traveled through, they drove through our spillway, which is like this muddy mess with trucks, and there was abandoned cars everywhere. There's some photos of that coming out. You know, the place is decimated, right? And it's just by luck. We did later on lose a helicopter pilot in the fight. You know, another helicopter pilot died in northern Alberta. Another one just died last week. A bomber in Europe just crashed a couple days ago. And so, you know, these things cost lives and take time, and it's tough to figure out. But at the end of the day, you know, whether it's a small fire, it's the wrong fire at the wrong time in the wrong place is all you need for a disaster, right? And again, those are my people in the back there, right? They're gonna get 99.9% of them, but we can't get them all, right? We do the very best we can, and that's all we can do. And so, you know, when that point one comes, hopefully it never happens here, right? But it's gonna happen somewhere.
And if it does happen here?
Got to figure it out. you got things you got to figure out, right? You got to figure out some water stuff. You got to figure out some evacuation stuff. You got to figure out, you know, what your fire department can and can't do. You got to figure out what the structure protection part of the government can and can't do. You got to work together with multiple agencies. Your neighbors are here tonight to represent and be part of that solution. You know, it's everyone's got to work together for a solution, and it's and even then, bad things can happen, right?
I know you want to go on, but I want to ask you, as we were driving around, you kept twitching every time we drove down this the west side, hillside. You kept, I'm looking ahead at building structures and roads, and you're looking up at the hillside. I was wondering what you were thinking.
Nothing good. You know, it's amazing what you can get used to, right? You live here, you look around every day, and you get used to what you get used to. I drive in with fresh eyes, looking at a different type of community with two sheer walls going up, and you know, I get to the beach. I will tell you the most shocking thing, both my wife and I said as soon as we got here, was to get to the beach and look at like a row of 4, 5, 6, 7-story buildings. I didn't expect that for a second, right? That amount of people, that amount of doors in that area, I didn't expect that. So, you know, that tricked me. It always, and again, I'm not from the mountains, so just take this all with a grain of salt, right? It always, I have a hard time understanding building at the bottom of a mountain, but you guys know more about it. It's your deal. You got to figure it out. But that scares me, right? For sure. And again, remember that I'm not saying all these exact things are what happens here, but there's lessons to be learned in every community that has a forest around it from the things that I saw and the things that I did. So over and over and over again. You know, this used to be a one-time story for about 5 years, and now it's like a 10-time story. So, let's just talk about the down helicopter. The social side was crazy. Evacuations are crazy, right? You all have to go somewhere. You all have to stay somewhere, right? Evacuees are grouchy folks to deal with, right? They forget that they're out, they're safe. The very best thing you can be is an evacuee, because it means you made it, right? Some other options are being stuck in the middle of the crap or being dead. And so, you know, it's tough, right? This, you know, abandoned cars all over the place. And so my wife, what's the rule? You remember? Where's the fuel? Half is empty, right? Full is half full. So, you know, a lot of people had a lot of trouble. Oh, I'll get gas tomorrow, I'll get gas the next day. So it's staying ready, knowing what you're gonna do when it happens. You know, I had so many horrifying evacuation stories, right? But that being said, for those that were ready, knew what they were doing, right? One lady in Fort McMurray grabbed her 2 goats, her dog, her cat, a block of cheese, a box of crackers, a case of water, and her kids, and she was rolling. She did really good for about 150 kilometers until she ran out of gas, right? Others had lots of gas and picked people up along the way, but then all those abandoned cars start to clog up a highway, right? So, lots of tricks. You know, this is the worst job. Oh man, holy. How to make friends and influence people, be a police officer, right? These guys take a beating everywhere I go, right? They're, you know, you go this way, you go that way, you can go, you have to stay out, you can come in. You can imagine what it's like to be them, right? My favorite all-time story is a rich guy story, so I love to tell it. It's one of the probably wealthiest guys in our whole town. He lives on the lake, he looks out, and the police come to evacuate him because the fire was coming, and he said, "There's not enough of you to evacuate me from my house." And the cop said, "Sounds good," jumped back in his car, went down to the roadblock, got 5 more cops and 2 more cars, and pulled into the driveway. And Ken was smart enough, he was already packing stuff in his truck, and he's like, "Now you got enough. Let's get out of here, you guys." And so, you know, it's just, sometimes it's tricky, right? But yeah, you know, it's tough here. Your police come from out of town, so they're going to be against the flow of traffic trying to get in here. Your friends from Agassiz, did I say that right? Probably not, sorry. Agassiz are going to be trying to get here, but they're going to be against the flow of traffic as people try to get out. So these are all things that are part of all of these lessons, right? You tell this is an old video or an old picture because it's got the movie gallery still, but I can tell you in our small town, the Liquor Depot, Subway, and Movie Gallery never had an empty parking lot, not once ever. So this was unusual to me, so I took a picture of it to remind myself how weird it was. They turned the street lights off when the power went out. Obviously, the street lights were off, and they left them off for about 2 weeks. And it's just how things go, right? My son was driving around police cars, 15 years old, no license, trying to pick stuff up for the guys, and we're driving around, and it was always like fire trucks had the right of way, then ambulances, then police cars, and then anyone else that was around. So later on, 2 weeks later, they turned the lights back on, and it was about the 3rd day after that happened. I was going to a meeting at the town office, and I got to the light, and it was red, and I remember looking, and no one was coming, so I just drove through. And the only thing that made me know that I made a mistake was the face of the guy that was facing me, because he's parked at the red light, and he's like, and I'm like, oh. So I got to the meeting, right? And so the safety point of the day was, hey, the lights are back on. Maybe we should all drive properly and not get in any car accidents. So it's hard to adjust, right?
Jamie, did you want to open it up to questions?
Yeah, I think we're getting ready. Yeah, we're kind of at the end here. This is Jim, his house. We had 7 firefighters lost their houses. 7 had them damaged. This guy lived in our furnace room for 2 weeks till they got him into the old folks lodge. He was a big hit there. He actually just about didn't move out of there after. But yeah. Anyways, crazy stories. Questions. Let's get to the questions.
What were the causes of those fires?
Both arson. Arson.
Delicious?
I don't know other kinds of arson.
Well, accidental, that somebody actually wanted.
Yeah, not discarded material, not, arson.
So I was reading your report, or the report, and it said the fire jumped the Athabasca.
Yep.
How wide is it?
So that was the Fort McMurray fire, and it's a kilometer across from treetop to treetop across the top. So this one, easy. The embers went in a kilometer easy. I would say farther. Fort McMurray, yeah. So the big fail-safe was, don't worry, it'll get to the Athabasca, which is one of the biggest rivers in this entire country. And it jumped over that like it was child's play.
Jamie, you noticed a really interesting thing in our East Sector Forest today, as we drove McCombs.
What's that? Sorry, I missed
You,
the...
you noticed a really interesting thing about the tree types
Oh,
in the
yeah,
East
we-
Sector Forest?
You guys tricked me a bit. Because as I was driving down that road, I was like, I don't understand what the big fear is. These trees don't burn, right?
They were all broadleaf trees.
Yeah, it's like, 100 feet of these big leafed trees that don't really burn that good. But then we went down this road, and when we turned back, I was like, that's just where they did the construction. Those are the kinds of trees that grew back. The trees that are a problem are like 100 feet behind those trees. And so you even tricked me with your tricky construction trees. But I see that the real problem is just in behind there. And I think that was kind of a thing that I saw lots of places actually as I drove around town. There's places that I certainly felt safe and felt like were safe areas, and then there was other areas where on those bad days where it's super dry and hot and a bit of wind, there's some more tricky places, right? And so that's always a tough piece.
What does densification of, like, so we are in a small area, and when we start building more and more places that are closer together, like the townhouses and the little places and all those concrete jungles that are coming up, how does that affect the fire going through your town?
Well, it's a lot more fuel, no question, right?
We actually,
Sorry, we actually went to some of those communities today off Hot Springs Road.
Yeah, so densification is always a problem because it's a lot of people, right? So this is a 3-story apartment building with no firefighting effort. That's what's left. So it won't be a problem when it's all done. But at the time, right? So if it's a 100-door apartment building, 2 people per door, 200 more people trying to be on the road, trying to evacuate, trying to use the resources, trying to use the water, trying to, 200 families worth of more cars. So, the densification is a problem because it starts to take away space, right? And so for the work that fire departments do, for example, the more space, the better for us, right? So, in the old days, you wouldn't build a house. You could never touch your neighbor's house, never in a million years. No one wanted to be that close. Today, you could turn sideways and almost be touching your neighbor's house, right? So, the tighter they build those, the more of them they build, the tougher this all gets, no question. So, it's a tough piece for planning, and for the fire department has, a lot of planning to do around that kind of thing. How we're going to handle, today's houses are way different too, right? And so we build more of them, we build them higher, we build them closer together. They built at I don't know what it is in BC, but in Alberta we could build 6 stories out of wood. Is that the same here, folks? Same, yeah. So, now you got a wood structure 6 stories tall that you can burn down. So it's getting tricky. It does make it easier.
I was surprised to hear that your emergency operations center burned. Was that not known as a fire from the building? And if so, what failed that allowed you to lose that particular facility?
Flat roof,
Yeah.
exposed tar, no gravel.
Oh,
And when they rebuilt it, guess what kind of roof they built? Flat roof, tar, no gravel. Can't make this up, sorry.
Other questions?
I'm wondering about the propane tank.
Oh yeah,
That's a great-
propane tanks,
That's
yeah.
a great question. If you don't mind, just other people can hear the question.
Yeah, so we got to propane tanks. So we got to drive around today and have a good look, right? And my dad lives in a RV park similar to some of the ones that are here in Arizona in the wintertime. So it's pretty safe out there in the desert. But here, there's some tricky pieces to that, right? Each trailer having whether it's 2 20-pounders, 30-pounders, 40-pounders, 100-pounders, maybe some of them use the big pigs, the 300-pound pigs. Every one of those is next to the deck, next to the trailer, next to the, right? So having propane, that volume of propane has to be handled well. right? It has to be understood, right? I'm sure your fire department gets the risk. I'm sure so it's all good until it's not, right? So propane is typically pretty safe, especially in an open area like that. It's only going to be bad when something bad happens, right? And so, working together with the owners of those places to where are we going to put them and how are we going to put them, and realizing it's a risk when there's a fire there. The people in the back get that stuff, right? I think your hand's been up a long time. Go ahead.
Hi. I'd like to know what kind of a difference the fire hoses that the fire department are offering would make in the event of a fire.
That's a great question.
The hoses for the roofs,
Oh, this is where I'll try to leave my opinion mostly out of it. When a fire is coming, adding water to the atmosphere certainly will help. Wetting down your house will help, but you have to remember if 1,000 houses all wet down the roof of their house, so it's a 1/2 inch line times 1,000, that's a lot of water. I don't know if you looked up at your water tank lately, but if everyone's doing it and everyone's using up that water, that doesn't leave much for the fine folks that need it when it's time to fight fires. And so sprinklers are tricky because I think they give you a sense of security for your home, but it's actually using a fairly valuable resource, which is the water that the fire department needs to fight fires. And so I don't want to tell you not to do it and not to use it, because there is some value there, but you have to remember that if everyone in town is using it, that reservoir, right, 1,000 1/2 inch lines is a lot of water, right? And so I think typically what would be good is, again, to have those zones, right? So if the fire department says, hey, if you're in evacuation zone 3 and you turn your sprinklers on, that's helping us because that's where the fire is going to come. If everybody turns it on, that may hurt us in some ways, right? And so again, I hope I answer your question. That's not necessarily my question to answer. Those folks know how much water they have and how much they need and how they're gonna do the different things that they do. But I know that 4,000 WASP sprinklers are still gonna use a fair amount of water. And so it depends how much you got to spare.
You said that when you drove in here, you got kind of itchy. Does that mean that you're worried about which way the wind's blowing and a fire?
Yeah, it means there was...
We have a community wildfire protection plan that has the wind blowing the wrong way at the hottest time, and it's going that way. And they say it's going that way, but it's actually heading north. So if you punch a road in, like beyond Rockwell Drive, you're gonna fry the people.
Jamie and I talked about that, even he knows it's wrong.
Consultants, eh? Yeah, so more than one way out doesn't mean you use them both at the same time. It means you have options depending on where the fire is and which way the wind's blowing and what the emergency services people tell you to do, right? More than one way out is always, it's about options, right? So it's not, I can't think, in a valley like this, I can't imagine sending people in 2 directions, right? It would give us options to send them either this direction or that direction, depending on what's happening with the wind and the weather and the answer to that question can only come on the day that it happens. I can't give it to you today because I don't know what's happening, right? So those folks are the ones that got to tell you the fire is here, it's going this direction with this wind. So they're the ones that decide, send the people here, send the people there. These people can wait for a while, those people have to go now. We could play the what if game all day long, but they're the ones that are buried in it on that day and got to make all those decisions.
So just, I see it's getting pretty late. A couple real quick questions at the end.
Well, I'm quite concerned about the evacuation, being involved with it for about 30 years. And one of the things you didn't mention in your experience there was any deployment of your resources to fighting the fires or protecting the evacuation routes and keeping them open. Is that a valid thing to do? And I think about Rockwell Drive, if we gotta go up there, maybe it needs a fire truck to be hosing down the mountainside or something. Do you ever divert firefighting resources to keeping evacuation routes open?
So guys like me try not to use words like always and never. It's a bit tricky for us, right? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the number one thing, doesn't matter what's going on, is get all the people out, right? So it's human life is the number one thing. After that is trying to protect your houses and save what we can save. And so, but in big firefights, it's about the people. It's not about, right? In a forest fire, you have to understand that your house is just another kind of tree. It doesn't differentiate, it doesn't care, it's just more fuel, it's gonna consume fuel. So it's always about getting people out. So all I could say is that they would have to make those decisions on those days about which way people go and what resources they use to get those people out. And I mean, there's, again, sadly, there's no thing I can tell you today that's the right answer, other than, you know, to make sure we resource the people that do have to make those decisions so that they got what they need to be able to make those decisions on those days.
Sullivan's got one more question, and then I thought we'd just wrap it. And
Sure.
I know you're going to stay.
Yeah, I'll
People
hang
wanting
on.
to
You can
talk.
ask me whatever.
Sullivan?
So Jamie, of the 430 houses that were burnt, how many rebuilt, and what's the community of Stave Lake look like now?
Small trees. One apartment building didn't rebuild. 7 houses chose not to rebuild because they didn't have insurance. There was about 30 or more, maybe 32 lots that just decided to sell their lots and move out of town to somewhere else. But for the most part, so the population today is just back to where it was in 2011. So we lost about 550 people, give or take. And it's back to the same today as it was. So, you know, people with insurance, how insurance works is you have to build back unless you make a special deal, what you had, where you had it. So most people built back. Most of the apartments built back. The one that didn't, it wasn't because it wasn't insured. They just were trying to figure out whether they should build 2 separate buildings back or one. And then it got all jammed up in all kinds of stuff and never got rebuilt. But all the rest of the apartment buildings came back. All the rest of the houses came back. We rebuilt the government center, identical to how it was. So today, if I drove you around, the only difference you'd be able to tell is, one, the houses in a certain part of town look a lot newer and nicer than they would typically, and they got a lot smaller trees. That's really the only way to tell.
Cam's got a final question back here.
Thank you. Jamie, thanks for coming out for the talk. I've been to all those towns. It's devastating. I've seen the damage. It is a reality. My question, because I'm not politically involved very much due to the nature of my work, I travel a lot. So I'm not really able to attend a lot of the meetings and things here locally. But I'm curious, are you yourself having an input to Harrison Hot Springs in regards to a fire plan?
No, I just took 2 days to come out here before I go visit my mom.
Yeah. But you're joking, right? No? Or are you just here?
I'm just here because this is what I do, and Ross
Yeah.
reached out and.
Okay. Because I would like I presume everyone here is concerned. So I'm guessing there's a committee of people involved here in the village that potentially talk about fire protection on a hopefully regular basis. Hopefully some of these people can get together and get a good plan going, right? Because there's a million questions and we could be here for hours and hours, right? But once again, thanks, Jamie. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cam.
It's
my greatest fear, just leveraging off what Cam said, my greatest fear is we're here next year, 2 years, 5 years from now, having the same freaking question, right? And that really terrifies me, given our new reality and our failure to be able to adapt. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank Jamie for coming out. I really appreciate everything you've done. The two of you have worked really, really hard in the last 2 days to pull things together, to get an understanding of what's different here so that you can carry some messages in terms of what the possibilities are. So on behalf of the community, Jamie? Thanks, bud.
Anyways, I'd just like to wrap up if I could.
Hang on. Kirsten, where are you? You're hiding, yeah. Kirsten, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You know, this probably isn't everybody's idea of a holiday, so thank you for making the sacrifice.
Wait, don't tell her that. She literally thinks this is a holiday. Yeah, to kind of just fill you in, we're the weirdest couple you'll ever meet. So after this fire, we decided that we would visit 500 fire halls in North America. And so we just actually got that maybe 4 fire halls ago. A month ago, we went to Saskatchewan, we visited a small town fire hall and got to our 500 goals. So this literally is a holiday for us, which is sad in a way, but the people here have been super friendly. Thanks to Ross for reaching out, and I'm happy that it worked out. I could visit my mom and talk here at the same time. I really didn't come here to try and scare you. I hope you understand that, right? I'm a big lesson learned guy. I share those lessons across North America. I know that some of what I said scares you, but at the end of the day, right, someone said it, right? It's one of those things. You could be the optimist, you could be the pessimist, or you could be the realist. In my life, I've been forced to be the realist. I like to share that. It's part of my journey and doing my thing. You know, we do a lot of work in Nova Scotia, weirdest connection, but in Nova Scotia and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta. But you know, we go to so many communities that have such different setups and all of those things. And first question everyone asked Ross was no different, right? Is this the worst you ever saw? And they're all good and bad in their own ways when it comes to fires, right? And so what you just said is the key. What you just said is the key, right? That everyone's got to just get together, get over it, figure out ego, turf, time, and money, and just start to come up with a plan and support each other through that plan, right? So there's, remember the good old days when we all just worked together? We need to figure that out, and we need to be able to just work together.